I'd like to now formally welcome the Commissioner of the largest force in Australia, Commissioner Scipione. Please make him welcome.
Well, thank you for that welcome, Ahmed, and thank you for the opportunity to be here this morning to talk with you. Certainly my thanks go out to you. I can recall sitting in this room actually, enjoying a meal with you and your group, where you extended the invitation for me to come down and be part of your program, and I've got to say it's a great privilege, and I've certainly been looking forward to it. My time with you is limited. We will stick to the time frames. I'll tidy this up and then we'll be finished and out of here by 9:30. If you do need to go, please make your way, realising that you've all got very busy days, and I'm sure that those calls will be sufficient for you to get away when you need to. So don't think that I'll in any way be offended. The amount of territory that we've got potentially to go over is enormous. We do a very big job, but I want to explore particularly our experiences as we become a globally connected force. We've found consistently that many of the most powerful results that we actually get don't come from that global interaction. They come from our local level connectedness to community. So I really want to touch upon a few of those areas. Some of the contemporary policing issues, I want to give some context. But I also want to touch on some of the more recent and significant issues that we've been experiencing across the New South Wales Police Force for some little while now. What I would like to do first and foremost, though, is to acknowledge, like Ahmed, that this is Remembrance Day. It's important that we stop and give back a minute in remembrance of those that gave everything for us. And so, as a proud Australian, I would encourage you to do that as well. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which today's meeting is taking place, recognising their ongoing cultural and spiritual connection with the land, and paying my respects to their elders, both past and present. I think today it's important for us to, and I love that backdrop. The last 3 times I've been here, I love that backdrop because of the words that are captured there. The fact that we talk about building bridges, dialogue, education, and service. I think that captures so well what it is that I would like to see in a modern community, in a modern society. That comes from understanding what diversity is really about. And I want to have a look at that today. I want to have a look at diversity from a community perspective and diversity from a policing perspective. That rolls into our community engagement and social action and civil society. So as I've said, there's much to get through. If you'll indulge me and let me push through, we'll then take your questions, and I'm sure they'll be well informed and will push me to the limits. In years past, the protection of our communities was very much geographically contained. For the New South Wales Police Force at least, the state's borders much more clearly defined or limited our reach than is the case today. Like that old cartoon where the dog was tied by way of his lead to a kennel, and he couldn't run beyond that lead, the limits of our jurisdictions then were all too clear to us and also to the offenders that we were dealing with. On occasion, the police vehicle or the police officer quite literally almost skidded to a stop at the border. However, in the 21st century, the threats are substantially broader, and they now traverse state, national and international jurisdictions. And with it, the New South Wales Police Force is increasingly connected and global. By necessity, the reach of the chain is growing increasingly longer. As the abstract for this session noted, criminals, natural disasters and other emergencies are no respecters of artificial borders or boundaries. Accordingly, police have been required to respond with a range of strategies, programs and mutually recognised legislation that facilitate cooperation locally and internationally. Be it bushfires in Victoria, floods in Queensland, the Commonwealth Heads of Government in Western Australia, earthquakes in New Zealand, even the tsunami and earthquakes in Japan. New South Wales police officers assisted in all of those and more. And right now, let me tell you, only last week we farewelled about 600 New South Wales police officers that are currently serving on the streets of Brisbane in the G20 meeting. Similarly, with crime, drug criminals, illegal firearm importers, cyber criminals, murderers who abscond overseas, we've got an increasing number of national and international arrangements that enable us to address crime when and where it is most strategic to do so. We may be the New South Wales Police Force, but our connections, our partnerships, our cooperation extend worldwide. Crime, emergencies, all policing issues really cross borders, be they state borders or boundaries, jurisdictional boundaries, agency boundaries, legislative boundaries, or any of several other boundaries. Similarly for terrorism-related crimes, an area where our global connections and local actions are very apparent. Though it wasn't on home soil, my sense is that from my experience at least, many people, many Australians, were first touched by the realities of terrorism after 9/11 in 2001, and to a much greater extent by the Bali bombings in 2002 and 2005. In the years that followed, Madrid, London, Mumbai, these and other incidents reinforced or perhaps awoken Australians to the reality that terrorism could be homegrown. It wasn't necessarily something that was dropped from a plane or fired across a border or detonated in some far-off square. Our geographic isolation was no longer a safeguard. Not that it ever was, but I'll come back to that. For others, the watershed moment was a little earlier, the late 90s and the lead up to the Sydney Olympics, perhaps in 2000. Now, while those games were successful by most measures, safety, creativity, the Olympic spirit, the Australian medal tally, there was certainly a shift of gears behind the scenes in terms of national security. Tackling terrorism at its source remained essential, but we no longer considered that to be the only potential front. That said, we know that there were incidents on home soil long before that, through the 70s and into the 80s. Bombings of the Yugoslav General Trade Agency in Sydney, the Sydney Hilton Hotel during a Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, the Israeli Consulate and the Harkoa Club, the Turkish Consulate in Melbourne, the assassination of the Turkish Consul General in Sydney. And so it's certainly been instructive for me to observe our responses and our preparedness against that landscape in the timeline. I became Deputy Commissioner in 2002 and then Commissioner of the New South Wales Police Force in 2007. And if I look back over just that period, new conflicts have emerged, old conflicts have reignited, tactics and methodologies have evolved on our side and on theirs, and yet many of the fundamentals remain the same. There are few stronger examples of the need for a global awareness than the impacts of conflicts within Syria, Iraq and Afghanistan. Escalations in activities that includes Australia's actively participating in the international conflicts, recruiting Australians, and when international participation is not possible, inciting activity within Australia. And sure enough, through the wonders of social media, Twitter especially, we've had that confirmed. It's staggering to me how much hatred you can pack into 140 characters that is in a tweet. With the impact of globalisation, technology and the media, what happens on the other side of the world is in our lounge rooms, on our phones and our computer screens instantaneously. And this in itself has necessitated new ways of working for police both locally and nationally. So it's fair to say that since 2002 in particular, and the signing of what was the original intergovernmental agreement on Australia's national counter-terrorism arrangements, all jurisdictions and all agencies have undertaken significant work to develop plans and arrangements that actually respect and promote interagency and jurisdictional cooperation. I don't want to use too many quotes today, but I want to use this one to start with. I want to quote President Obama. Just as no nation can wall itself off from the world, no one nation, no matter how large, no matter how powerful, can meet these challenges alone, nor can governments alone. Today's threats demand new partnerships across sectors and across societies, creative collaborations to achieve what no one can accomplish alone. In short, we need a new spirit of global partnership. So, cooperation and collaboration, they're the things that we've become very good at in policing, I might say, right around the world. You know, if you look at our profession, if I get the chance to meet regularly with leaders of law enforcement agencies from across the world's biggest agencies. When I look at what they've done, I look at what we've done and what's happened here in Australia, I know that the profession, particularly here in New South Wales with our police force, have certainly seen harmonisation of many, many laws, mutual recognition of other laws. Our information and intelligence exchange has never been better. There are agreements and memorandum of understanding, intergovernmental and national meetings. We have treaties, state-to-state cooperation, and when I refer to states, I use that both in an intra and an international sense. Now, there are overarching bodies to facilitate cooperation. I meet with the heads of Europol, Interpol, and here in Australia, working with our partners and colleagues, including the Australian Federal Police, CrimTrack, the Australian Crime Commission, ANSPA, and many others. It's a long, long list, let me assure you. But we've never done this better. But all of that said, we are still just a state-based police force. Our purpose is to work with the community to reduce violence, crime and fear. And we find time and again that we are most effective as a force when we do just that. Whether it's local issues or international issues, genuine communication and trust with the community, simply put, community engagement, that's what opens up a way forward for us and produces the best results. One of our key groups of officers working in this space, I'll take just a minute to talk about for those of you in the room that may not know about them. It's our Community Contact Unit, or as we call them, the CCU. The CCU was established in 2007. It actually provides an interface between the New South Wales Police and community, particularly those communities that are at risk of radicalisation. It focuses on identifying, liaising with and building long-term partnerships, and that's really important. This is not just a flash in the pan. This is about building long-term partnerships which are critical to the process of engagement with communities or individuals that are at risk of radicalisation, likely victims of terrorism or politically motivated bias, or likely to be impacted by the New South Wales Police Force and its use of terrorism powers. So that's the reason why we created that particular unit. The unit has established contacts in all communities that might be affected by terrorism, including Muslim, Chinese, Indian, Jewish, Afghani, Indian, Tamil, to mention just a few. It's about working in all communities that may be touched by, as I've said, those particular drivers that was the reason why we established the group. Now, the work of the CCU has contributed to the success of safe protests, counter-terrorism operations, police recruitment drives and events, as well as building relationships with key internal and external stakeholders, such as academia. I'll give you a few examples of how we've done that. We've done it by working with key leaders during high-profile national security operations to ensure that they actually receive factual and verifiable information firsthand. And this happens and continues right through to today. We did this in the most recent Operation Appleby, where again, first-hand information, talking with leaders, community leaders, we saw as being vital. That was in fact happening at the same time as the operation was unfolding. We've been very active in dispelling rumours that were circulating within particularly Islamic communities, following adverse media reports, such as reports that there were radical sermons from a sheikh in Yemen being played at the Lakemba Mosque. We've actually provided a lot of assistance to the Communal Security Group and the Jewish Board of Deputies during the Jewish high holidays and protests following the Gaza blockade. There are many others, but in the interest of time, I think we might just move on. It's often said that an investment in community engagement in times of peace is what we actually draw on in times of conflict, and it's true. So we've long shifted from the notion that community engagement was the warm and fuzzy stuff that we did if you just had a little bit of time left over, or it was the nice stuff. Whereas real policing was all about locking up crooks, cracking down on crime. That's not reality. That's not modern reality. Now, having spoken about the CCU, our commitment to community engagement, as I said, isn't just a one-off thing. It's not a flash in the pan. It's that we don't just have one unit doing this work. we've realised that we need to broaden this across the entire organisation. It's now an integral part of operating policing, right across the force. When we investigate a crime, when we interact with victims, offenders, witnesses, or the general community, when we actually give a media statement, put a media statement out about incidents, we build community engagement strategies into every one of those activities because it serves a most important operational purpose. The officers on the ground tell me that when they've engaged with communities and groups and individuals in an authentic way in the course of their core policing operations, their day-to-day operations, they actually see an impact. It impacts on things like the reporting rates. People are more willing to actually give statements and to give information. They actually want to work with their police. It results in investigations where offenders have been identified and crimes have been solved and cleared. And to clear up crime, we know most offenders don't necessarily offend once. If we can clear up a crime, if we can take a criminal out of circulation, we in fact prevent crime. I believe that a crucial issue in community engagement is recognising and honouring and acknowledging the existence and the promise of diversity. In the New South Wales Police Force, we take diversity very seriously, be it in responding to crime, engaging communities, participating in public events, or in the day-to-day work of every officer in every interaction. In fact, the global and local events of recent months have again heightened the necessity to ask the question, are we equipping our officers with the skills, the self-awareness, the knowledge, the understanding, the attributes required to police in a culturally, religious, politically, and contextually diverse environment? Perhaps erroneously, people often think that our diversity is a relatively new thing. Well, the existence, the need, the benefits, the justness of it only realised in recent decades, and that's not true. Diversity is not a new concept for Australia. It existed in the earliest days of European settlement and long before that actually. Our Aboriginal communities were diverse in languages, practices and connections to place. And it's upon that enduring diversity of our Aboriginal people that we actually build the concept of diversity within multicultural and other diverse groups. With over a quarter of our population in New South Wales born overseas, New South Wales is one of the most diverse places in the world. When our cultural, linguistic and religious diversity statistics are considered in proportion to our total population, we are positioned, I'm advised, as the second most diverse place on the planet. Over 241 language groups from a myriad of ethnicities and cultures that sit alongside over 500 Aboriginal languages past and present. You know, we've come a long way in the force over the last 10 years as to how we understand, develop and implement processes and practices that are about diversity. In fact, diversity is no longer about them, it's about us. While we accept that diversity capability is something that cannot be reduced to a mere checklist of cultural do's and don'ts, the presence of effective diversity skills, abilities, effective attributes all contribute to diversity capability at a level that's relevant and necessary in today's policing context. We've trialled and we've tested what we refer to as an integrated model of diversity training, which positions tailored and operationally relevant diversity skills actually at the centre, at the core of police training. We've immersed diversity skills into recruit training, detectives education, human source management, leadership development and custody training. That's just to name a few. Diversity of thought, the impact of perceptual sets of assumptions and the growing awareness of the presence of unconscious bias on decision making have all been incorporated in the planning and the delivery of our brand of diversity training that we actually train in New South Wales. As police, we continually find ourselves not only policing crime but also the perceptions of crime. And in that we are obliged to make it our business to counteract the myths that contribute to disharmony in our communities, and there are plenty out there. A common myth that comes to the force regularly is that migrants and refugees bring their conflict with them. Have you heard that before? When in fact we know that the opposite is most often true. For the vast majority, the reason many go to great lengths to escape or leave their country of origin is because They too are wanting to leave the conflict. They don't agree with it or just want a better life. The ability to discern the truth and respond knowledgeably to unhelpful assumptions and stereotypes is integral to skills in diversity, in particular the attributes of the trainers delivering it. Having said this, we need to acknowledge that conflict, civil unrest, war and torture and trauma are present in our world today. There are over 100 low-intensity wars in the world. Torture is practiced in over 120 countries as government-sanctioned violence, and violation of human rights happens every day. The continued violation of human rights, and in particular those of children and the vulnerable, have seen police as first responders actually immersed in conflicts that may be unknown to them. And the challenge of joining the dots has meant that training has had to develop to a more complex level of analysis and skills. Now, the current events in the Middle East, Palestine, Iraq, Syria, Egypt, Lebanon, along with many African countries, has raised the bar in terms of the needs for officers who are flexible, responsive and equipped to police in a diverse context. The events of recent months and the heightened terror alerts have seen an increase in population groups targeted and victimised, as well as police being scrutinised for their responses. Now, against that backdrop, the images and messages created by media can serve to placate or inflate, depending on the lens through which information is viewed. This again places responsibility within our police media units to take control of the messages that we convey and the impact that they may have at a community level, to write our messages where relevant for translation, to provide press releases which may be aimed at specific target groups in languages that are accessible to those groups, and to ensure that the message intended is the message received. So law enforcement must be a key partner and actually embracing and responding to diversities in ways that enhance police effectiveness, increases community confidence and promotes cohesive communities. But the best diversity training in the world isn't the complete answer. Our internal workforce diversity must mirror the communities that we serve. That's a reality, and that's increasingly been the case. The New South Wales Police Force consists of more than 20,000 employees. Over 16,000 of them are sworn, working alongside our unsworn employees. We have a vision for a respectful, equitable and a diverse workforce reflective of our community. And we see the diversity of our workforce as an enormous asset. It is one of our greatest assets. As is true of the general population, diversity is more than ethnicity, language and religion. It's the multitude of individual differences and similarities that exist amongst people. Gender, age, culture, ability, educational background, marital status, individual personality, and many other indelible salient features that are common to all, yet unique in their combination and manifestation. To see a person, group or community in terms of only one dimension, for instance their ethnicity, is to deny the other dimensions that holistically make up that individual person or group. Each of the dimensions intersect. None stand alone, though at times in a particular context, a particular dimension may be primary. So the way in which we view what makes up the whole person, that is the officer who works in the forces, as well as the way in which our officers view the people that they police, is critical. If we only see the person through one lens, then that skews our perception of them. It's only when we integrate the dimensions that a holistic and balanced picture emerges. There is a significant body of research that actually shows diversity within groups and organisations leads to superior outcomes in decision making. Alternate views and perspectives allow for a wider range of possibilities that could not be generated by some homogenous group. Diversity brings together different experiences and perspectives that serve as the catalyst for innovation. And let me tell you, I've seen that firsthand. I've observed that in our force. The diversity of today's New South Wales Police Force is incredible. When you look at the gender, the age, the culture, the languages, religion, settlement experiences, educational qualifications, professional backgrounds, diversity of thought, the list goes on. They are all tremendous assets. They're the things that we have today that we didn't have when I joined the New South Wales Police. We didn't have that. We were predominantly men of Anglo-Saxon background. And that was it. What a difference. If we manage and deploy the workforce that we've got today, our workforce effectively, harnessing their diverse skills and abilities, then we will go a long way to providing the kind of police force that diverse communities right across New South Wales want, deserve, and really should be getting. We reduce polarisation where communities feel the police do not represent them, that they're different to them or the other, or they feel that they are viewed as the other. Likewise, police feel the community looks and is different from them and is the other. That's not good. Polarisation is a bad thing. But when our immediate workplace looks similar to the community out there that we go and we serve, it's then that the divide is reduced. Police are the community and of the community that they serve. Again, it's not a new concept. Many in the room wouldn't remember the name or would have heard of the name Sir Robert Peel. A British statesman, twice served as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, often referred to as the father of modern policing. He said this, not yesterday, but in 1829. The police at all times should maintain a relationship with the public that gives reality to the historic tradition that the police are the public and the public are the police. The police are the only members of the public who are paid to give full-time attention to duties which are incumbent on every citizen in the intent of the community welfare. He got it right. He got it right. A diverse workforce places the New South Wales Police Force into a stronger position to deliver that responsive, high-quality policing service that communities rightly expect. So we have collectively, as policing jurisdictions, positioned communities as primary to policing. And we position ourselves as an organisation that builds strong communities, that improve community resilience, have enduring relationships, apply problem solving, but also support community skills and efforts in problem solving. We now expect in New South Wales our local area commanders to conduct an environmental scan of the areas where they serve. They need to know what's happening. This means that as a starting point, they need to know the diversity of the demographics in their patch, the key institutions of significance to these diverse communities, places that communities or groups gather, places that they may avoid, the movement of people, temporary residents, new arrivals, secondary settlement, educational providers, local resources, and the social and economic links. Then, based on the statistics and trends for that area, they have to overlay the crime issues with community needs. Who are the offenders for particular crimes? Who are the victims? How can prevention generally be emphasised? Who is the target community for that messaging? How do we tailor our messages? Will they be receptive to the message or resistant? How will we get support from within the community to spread the message of crime prevention wider? However, and that's what we do, however, this all creates a constant tension in the organisation between proactive and reactive policing. We can't ignore the everyday demands of the local police station, the call-outs, the jobs to attend to, documentations, the records that need to be maintained. We can't ignore that. The procedural matters that making entries onto the computer system, which are so important in this day and age because of the accountabilities. And then we expect police to keep themselves trained and up to date. So there's a lot for them to do. However, and to borrow from Einstein, my last quote for the morning, you can't continue to do the same old, yet expect different results or better outcomes. It just won't happen. Proactivity and prevention have to be complementary to the other functions of taking everything from the 000 call to investigating a regular crime. To update the old truism, a gram of prevention is equal to a kilogram of cure. Preventing one career criminal can save society millions of dollars. Believe me, we've seen it. And that often involves imaginative or creative options, new ways of getting the best. It often involves persuading others to do something to fix the problem. And that's where this community engagement comes on. We've spent considerable time and thought on examining the concept of community engagement as relevant to the policing context. For our purposes, we define community engagement as a long-term process through which we try to involve people, individuals, groups, in identifying problems and shaping and implementing decisions and programs that affect them in their local areas. We see community engagement as being a tiered process where engagement activities can occur at 4 broad levels. First of those, we would say, is engagement at the communication level. And that's where we provide general information or information in response to an identified issue. You know, you've seen them, a police stall at a shopping plaza or in a shopping centre, providing information on crime prevention, presentations about personal safety to community groups, distributing promotional material to encourage recruitment into the police force at a recruitment day. They're all examples of the type of engagement. Every day right across the state, local police and specialist commands are conducting hundreds of engagement activities that seek to communicate particular information to communities. You know, our use of social media, Facebook, Twitter, iWatch, they're all examples of this communication level engagement. Engagement then at the next level is what we call consultation, where we discuss specific issues at focus groups or consultative committees or public meetings. Now, these usually involve people who represent the demographic profile of a particular community. The Police Aboriginal Community Consultative Committees are an example of this. So too are the community awareness of policing programs that aren't talked about. The Police Multicultural Advisory Council, of which we have members from Affinity a part of. You know, there are many others, the Community Safety Precinct Committees and the Police Aboriginal Strategic Advisory Council. They're all representative of what we do at that consultation level. Many commands with highly cultural diverse demographics host multicultural consultative committees locally. Arguably though, the direction of information flow at both the communication and consultation level is still predominantly one way. We hand it out from us to the community. When we present information to community groups or hold a consultation, there is not necessarily shared decision making with community members present. They're often recipients of the information, or they provide us with feedback on the issue that we've actually consulted them about. However, we're not always committing to take their feedback on board or act upon it, or in fact get back to them with information on how we utilise the feedback that they gave us. And so if we have to move to the next level, it's engagement. So engagement at the participation level is where we are working with communities on an ongoing basis and developing a shared understanding of the issues and the solutions and where the solutions are implemented collaboratively. Now, this type of engagement often develops after police have been working with a community for a period of time. This is not something that happens quickly. For example, many commands have undertaken this successfully with international students and educational providers, with Aboriginal communities, particularly in Western New South Wales. As an example, Flemington Local Area Command has a program that they call Take the Lead. It's a project focused on building the capacity of identified community leaders from different cultural backgrounds by providing the necessary skills and information to intervene in non-violent family conflict situations in an attempt to reduce the incidence of domestic and family violence, a most worthy program. The command identified 20 leaders from 10 community groups and secured funding from local council and a local TAFE to deliver a 2-day course covering conflict resolution, mediation and police and legal processes pertaining to domestic and family violence. You know, some would say that's not a lot, but that means a lot to communities in crisis dealing with this type of violence. Selected police from the local area command and the identified leaders went through the course together. The course attendees are now being utilised as support persons in the local area command's non-violent domestic and family violence incidents. You know, Take the Lead, while Take the Lead is a great example of getting community members engaged at a participation level, police efforts are still required to continue to support those course attendees, and so we still remain significantly engaged, and that will always be the case. You know, that's participation. So let's look at the fourth level of engagement, where the engagement is sustained to the point where the community takes responsibility for and in fact leads crime prevention strategies, only calling upon police for support from time to time. That is, police inform and support the process while the community leads it. Examples of this are actually a little bit harder to come by, but I'm proud to say they do exist. There's a project called Call Me, the Call Me project, which started as a partnership between Wollongong Local Area Command and the University of Wollongong. But it evolved into an initiative where third-year graphic design students actually designed ongoing safety messages for use on campus. They were brilliant. Visually catching images, slogans on billboards around the university campus, and other collateral products that connect with and speak to the students much better than we ever could. And we no longer are in the driver's seat with that particular project. Another, Clean Slate Without Prejudice. This is a really interesting one. It's a boxing program. Some of you would have heard about this. That was started by the commander of the Redfern Local Area Command in 2009. It was in collaboration with local Aboriginal leaders and organisations. The program targeted Indigenous youth who had committed a crime but had not yet been sentenced or were incarcerated in juvenile justice centres, and young offenders who'd been released back into the community. It encompassed early intervention, developmental crime prevention, and positive relationships and support networks through behavioural workshops. But an Aboriginal mentor would actually bring the participant to boxing training 3 days a week and helps them find things that they need to get to in order to get back into the community: accommodation, employment and education, or training if that was what was necessary. Boxing training was conducted very early in the mornings, which helped others to provide participants with the discipline so that we saw as being so important to the other aspects or decisions in their lives that they needed to make. Now, participation in the program is voluntary, and a youth can stay on the program just as long as they might want. Now, this program's an excellent example of sustained engagement. Though the initial drive came from the commander and the police and required intensive police support to take young people to the training sessions and to train them with the youths, the Aboriginal community now own it as their program. And the young people, many of them previous offenders who went through the program at its inception, are now the trainers. And they're the mentors for other young participants, Aboriginal participants, and the results are there. You know, for example, crime rates relating to robbery offences in Redfern have dropped to some of the lowest levels we've ever seen since the inception of this program. I've been down there and talked to Aboriginal leaders, and they're telling me that you wouldn't believe how important this particular program has been in turning Redfern around. I do believe it. I do believe it. The information flow from the Aboriginal community has been incredibly improved. By way of example, a recent murder was the way they actually came forward and gave us information is a world away from what it used to be down there. Even a decade or so back, when trust between local community and police was, let's just say, a less abundant commodity. So quickly there are 4 broad levels of engagement: communication, consultation, participation and sustainment. We also have community members who have actually moved through those 4 levels of engagement. And this is really important. They might initially do something like the Community Awareness of Policing program, where we expose them to the organisation in depth, engaging at that communication level. From there, they might move and join one of our advisory committees, PMAC for instance, or PASAC, the Disability Advisory Council, engaging at the consultation and participation level, depending on how much joint problem solving was occurring at that particular council. A young lady who was part of my PMAC at the moment, the Multicultural Advisory Committee, Waji Ahmad is one such example. She participated in the Community Awareness of Policing program. She then joined the Police Multicultural Advisory Council, and now she's invested as a lawyer in family and domestic violence issues. She's working with us on how messaging to diverse communities should occur in domestic violence issues and reforms. I mean, she's engaging in joint problem solving, and she wants to do more in her own community, the Pakistani community, moving into that sustained level of engagement. And only last week we held a meeting of PMAC, and you could see the passion in her heart to go to the next step, to deal with domestic violence in her community, where she has enormous reach compared to anything that I or even many of my officers may do. That's what makes it work. We're very fortunate to have that level of engagement. There are many others that sit on that council with me. Namhi Ko in the Korean community, Mala Mehar in the Indian community, again, raising awareness, promoting police messages about family and domestic violence. When these members drive the message in their communities but look to us only for support every now and again, it's a sustained engagement. It no longer relies on us for the running, and that's the most important engagement that we can get involved in. Well, much of what I've covered positions police as the starting point or the focal point for engaging communities, and I don't see that as representative reality or necessarily desirable. And I'm talking about just being the starting point. So I'd like to close with some thoughts, perhaps a challenge relating to civil society, perhaps the ultimate expression or a higher model of sustained engagement. Firstly, in very general terms, my starting point is that civil society consists of the non-state actors, the individuals and the organisations independent of government, who actually come together to negotiate and promote common interests. In many countries, bringing about reform, accountability and ending impunity in areas of state activity, including policing, could only have happened due to the existence of a really robust civil society. We all know that. I'd argue that because Australia is a stable democracy and in so many ways the lucky country, the impetus for civil society traditions have not been as strong as they may have been in some of those other countries. That said, our number one priority for working in our diverse society is building trust and partnership with culturally, linguistically and religiously diverse communities through respect, dialogue, cooperation, appropriate and effective consultation and communication, which creates the mandate for the New South Wales Police Force to engage with a whole range of community groups, including civil society groups. When that's present, we actually see victims of crimes coming forward because they're confident the police will assist them. We see witnesses to crime coming forward because they trust that their police will listen to them and actually do something. You have a civil society offering different, perhaps better ways of tackling issues because they know that we will act. Now that sort of relationship and information exchange is essential to growth, to solving crimes and bringing offenders to justice. Within that context, we recognise the value and the importance of the unique ability of individuals and organisations, many of you gathered in this room for instance, to mobilise and to support people, particularly those who sometimes struggle to find a voice, or those who have struggled to have their voices heard above those with the loudest voices. You know what I'm talking about. Just as Affinity Intercultural Foundation has in creating this opportunity today, it encourages and enables people from all walks of life to play a more active role in creating a vibrant and informed civil society. I spoke about your increasingly diverse police force. I say yours because I don't own the police force, you do. It's better able to communicate with and respond to the various communities that we serve. Well, no matter how diverse, how sensitive, or how much energy and goodwill we bring, there will be times where others are better placed to carry the message. You will often have the ability to speak in voices that our diverse communities can better relate to. You can reach communities and speak to them in ways that we might not be able to. You can help create that environment in which all people feel able to step forward and make a difference. As a state player, it's very much our role to engage with elements of civil society constructively, and we know that a sophisticated civil society will only contribute to lifting our standards. I also take the view that for civil society to propose meaningful reforms to policing procedures and systems, they need a developed understanding of what we do and why we do it. Otherwise, they're likely to have an unrealistic expectation. So it makes sense for us to engage. Crime reduction, crime prevention and problem solving can come from a fruitful engagement between police and civil society groups. It can provide a laboratory where police can test and refine ideas and actually sharpen our effectiveness. With genuine communication and trust, we know that many voices can become one. And when we achieve that, that's when we all become the beneficiaries. We improve all of our lives. Thank you for the indulgence you've given me today to talk to you a little bit about our organisation. We do this best when we do it together, and I think today's opportunity to come and talk to you is one but example of how we can do it together. So thank you very much. I'm happy to take your questions.